Hello, everyone. I'm your host, Dr. Prashant, and this is your very own channel, Thinkers Unlimited, the place where we talk and the talk that makes you think. And it is both my pleasure and privilege that the very first guest on this show is Marc Cox, eminent writer and business consultant. Mark is the founder of the company Spirit and the originator of the philosophy and approach he calls the business case for love, a way of thinking forged from his own personal and business experiences, first in advertising, then in marketing, where he was hired to change the image of a UK retailer. These and more became the seeds of what he believes in today. Over the years, Mark has become increasingly interested in company culture, and 12 years ago, he founded the company Spirit. Nowadays, Mark gets hired by CEOs and leadership teams to help them understand what their company stands for and what makes it different. To do this, Mark helps them create an authentic set of values, sense of purpose, and beliefs which their employees get and customers feel. This is what he calls the company spirit. When Mark started his company, part of what made his approach different was the use of the word love. It was very polarizing, with a lot of senior people seeing it as a very soft and fluffy idea and nothing to do with business. Mark has now used this with his clients over the last decade and ultimately led him to writing his own book, The Business Case for Love. A very warm welcome to you, Mark, and a big thanks for accepting my invite.
No, well, thank you, Dr. Prashant, and it's a joy to be with you and your first guest. How exciting! Yes.
So, Mark, let's get this conversation started. So, with your years of experience and being an avid watcher of the times gone by, how would you describe leadership and its evolution over the years?
Well, it's an interesting question, and I'm going to answer it in a slightly different way because I think the real driver for change that I've become aware of is employees and what they want and what they expect. This comes from the last 10, 12 years of my work with the company Spirit, in that I've been lucky enough to work with different companies and different categories and all around the world, though sadly not India, although I hope one day to do that. And what's become clear to me is that the vast majority of employees want to feel proud of the company they work for. They want it to have some ethics. They want it to have some beliefs. They want it to have a sense of purpose. And in a way, because of that driver and that change, it's put a challenge up to leadership. It's put a challenge up to leadership where some have been able to thrive within this new drive, and others are struggling because they're sort of stuck in an old way of thinking. And because one of the key things that for me that has also changed, which again is requires a different type of leadership approach, is employees don't just want to feel proud about their company. They want to feel involved, and they want to feel as though they are collaborating in its future. It's interesting because most people, what was interesting to me is most people want two things from their bosses. They want clarity. They actually want they want to know the numbers. They want to know the objectives. They want to know the strategy. They want to know the direction of the company. But alongside the clarity, they also want to have this sense of collaboration. They want to feel as though they are part of bringing that strategy alive, or part of the journey to hit the targets that have been set. And therefore, again, this is a challenge for leadership because perhaps a lot of old style leadership may be quite so good on the clarity. This is what we're doing and just get on and do it, but they're not so good on the collaboration. And I think that is really what separates out, the two types of leaders that I see today. The old school leaders, who I think perhaps are still in the majority, who are largely about I. It's I do this, I want this, it's my business, you get on with it. Whereas actually the leaders who seem to be succeeding, or in my view are succeeding, not just for 6 months or a year, but actually are creating a sustainable company, are the ones that are much more about we. You know, we will do this together. We will create something. You know, yes, I might be the boss, but I mean, I want to encourage and inspire you to work together in order to make us successful. So for me, you know, and going back to the question, perhaps perhaps leadership has you know, the leaders who have always behaved in that way, you know, the old style command and control, perhaps they will never change. But I think what has happened is the requirements for employees who are looking for a different type of leadership has, and therefore those who can embrace collaboration, who can embrace team, are the ones that are much more in favor.
I think what I would like to add to what you have already said is that I feel that, you know, the leadership styles have become more participative than before, you know. And I think what has happened is that, you know, technology has, you know, not just played an enabler, it's become a driver. The youth of today is no longer blindly reverential as they were in the past, but they have their own voice and they need clarity of purpose, both in the organization and in sync with their own purpose. And somebody who can give them a very well-defined way to success. And another thing, Mark, I think, which has happened is I think leaders have become younger day by day. And I think today you see 28-year-old CEOs, which was kind of not even possible to dream 30, 40 years ago. That's something which is happening and people are accepting it more and more. And even I think the rules of engagement have changed. We are no longer divided into watertight silos. Leaders are more approachable, you know, so whether it's the coffee with the CMD or town hall meetings where you are opening up and sharing your thoughts are more in vogue than before.
Well, I think, and I suppose, I mean, certainly this was true of my generation, which is obviously a fair years on from the millennials. But I think, you know, I think we were more used to the opportunity to change roles and change direction. I think for the millennials, the 30-year-olds, it's even more so. You know, it's you know, they may set off with one idea, but it doesn't mean to say that they are going to stay in that career for 30, 40, 50 years. And they're much happier to move around. And then I think that's why, you know, there is this sense of looking for a culture that they enjoy, that they feel good about, that they feel as though they fit. So it's just not, obviously money is important. Money is important for the vast majority of people. People need to earn money to live, but it's not just the money nowadays. I think it's about the experience. It's about the employee experience. It's about do I feel good about the company I work for, and all of that comes back to, you know, the leadership style. And yes, I agree. I mean, there's many more, you know, younger CEOs out there, partly because, you know, there is the opportunity to start up a business younger, and also, you know, those people, you know, they're brought up with a different set of environment. They've been brought up in a different environment, and I think one of the, again, the existing leadership, I think one of the challenges is that the old style, the command and the control approach that is still out there, I think it would be very difficult for those people to change, because they grew up in a time when, you know, process and operations were very much the key drivers, and also, frankly, a sense of, you know, get on and do what I tell you to do, and you know, as we say in the UK, JFDI, and that has, you know, that doesn't work anymore. You know, I think that's it. And therefore that approach to leadership is, by definition, is gradually dying out. Thankfully.
So, Mark, one of the generations, which has been under the spotlight for past few years are the millennials. So, what do you have to say about the millennials at the workplace, and what are their expectations, and how do we nurture them for the best productivity?
Well, I think it's a great question, and when I've been thinking about this, I suppose I think the start point is 2008, and obviously 2008 was the last time the world was in a big crisis. That was a financial crisis which hit people in different ways. To what we're going through today, which is obviously a health crisis that's leading to an economic crisis. And the reason why I talk about 2008 is if you think about it, if you're 30 now, you were 18 then, and there was a good chance you were either leaving school or at the last year of school, or maybe going to university, or maybe starting work, and therefore the influences around you were quite strong, and I think I remember as if it was yesterday coming downstairs, because my daughter had not gone to university then, and she was watching the television. She said, "Daddy, Iceland's gone bankrupt," and she wasn't talking about the retail store; she was talking about the country, and I think that kind of that significance of what was happening weighed heavily on the shoulders of the millennials, because what happened was a real breakdown in trust. They looked at what their parents' generation had done and said, well, not for me, and not just a breakdown in trust. It was that sense of nobody was really accountable. Those that had caused the financial crisis sort of got away with it, and I think there was a knock-on effect to people thinking, well, those people get away with it, I'm not sure about, and therefore they were starting to question other institutions, other big companies, other government institutions, not just in the West, but all around the world, and therefore. As they've gone into work, I think the millennials are much more wired to looking for organizations that they trust. And therefore, they're much more aware of do I believe in what the company is saying? Do I agree with its ethos? Does it have an ethos? Does it care? And does it do what it says it does? And I have the phrase I use in the book as one of my best in class company behaviors, image and experience match. Does what the company says on the outside match up with the experience, either on the inside as an employee or as a customer? And because of what happened in 2008 and 2009, I think the millennials are very, very clear that they're looking for companies that do that, and I think it's a good thing. I think it's a good thing because it's starting to prioritize a different type of working environment where, again, 10, 12 years ago, the word company culture existed, but it perhaps was not as top of mind as it is now, and therefore, the millennials are looking for a culture that they believe in and they want to be part of.
Don't you think that the millennials are also a very misunderstood and kind of misrepresented generation? Because I think the generations before them, which includes us, have been threatened by their clarity of their thoughts when it comes to their expectations from either a workplace or the leaders, and they have that habit of never settling for mediocrity. And then, they have all of us constantly on the toes to be able to either meet up with their expectations or to be on the same page as them. So they are not kind of, they don't hold it back. They are out there. And I think that somehow makes them, make people around them feel threatened.
Well, they won't put up with rubbish, and they won't put up with bad behavior. I guess part of this is Me Too, and therefore that whole not putting up with bad behavior at work, whether it's verbal abuse or worse, and they will call it out, and they will, and I do think that's changed. I mean, and perhaps the generation that was older than that, they would, rightly or wrongly or sadly, put up with things more. But I think because of the going in position of the millennials, which is, I grew up when I didn't trust banks. I don't trust big business. The last 10 years have seen business, not in a great place. VW and Dieselgate and the lies that was all about that, and how a reputation can go. British Petroleum in terms of the way they handled Deepwater Horizon and the effects of that. So business often ends up on the front pages for the wrong reasons. And when the business is on the front pages for bad reasons, it's not. They don't talk about strategy. They always talk about behavior. They always talk about culture. Something's gone wrong, or the leadership has been driven in a different way. And the millennials watch all this, and they will say, look, I don't want to be part of that if I can.
They value culture more than any other generation, I believe, I think. And they are the ones who made culture such an important moot point of discussion for organizations, that because they are the ones who will not take bullshit of a culture. They will just walk out.
No, they do. And I think that last point is very true. I mean, I know a lot of people, who will, when they can, I mean, if they're in a bad place, or they've ended up, perhaps they've ended up thinking that the environment, the culture was going to be for them, and they get to work and it's not. When they can, they will go. And it might not be the next day because they've still got the salary to earn, but they will, they will go the curve on this, and they are still trying to, almost force fit people into jobs because of their CV or their skills and capabilities, and they're not spending enough time thinking about who they are and do they fit the culture of the company they're proposing them for, and ultimately, we've given what you do and given what I've done in my work, you naturally feel better. You naturally care more if you feel that you're in the right environment. And I think that's what millennials are looking for.
So if we look at the millennials, the generation after them, the generation Z, which you also talked about, if there's somebody who's, joining their first job in Jan of 2021, what would be advice that you would like to give them?
Well, I think I'd start off by saying, be true to yourself. I know it's a simple way of talking about it, but it's something obviously I believe strongly is work for a company or work in the environment you love. Think about your passion. Think about what it is you love doing, and don't be scared to actually follow that dream. And that because we talk a lot about work and beliefs and everything, or we have done already, and for me there's a simple truism, which is obviously part of what I mean by the business case for love, which is if you're in the environment where you do feel as though you're working for a company that has got a strong set of values and a strong sense of purpose, and the company does operate in a way that you feel is collaborative, and you do feel as though you're listened to and involved, the more you love what you do, I mean, the simple point is the more you care, and the more you care, and the more you believe in to people starting off in work is go with your heart, but really try and check out as best possible the culture of the company. Look at how it communicates. Does it do what it says? Say what it does and do what it says. Does the image and experience match? Does it have a listening culture? Does it have an environment where people can contribute and have ideas? And ultimately, do you feel good about the product? Do you feel good about what the company does? And I think that's the key criteria. Is obviously people want to have a good salary as well, but I don't think it starts with the salary anymore.
I think what I would like to kind of add upon the thing which you actually have raised is that if I have to say just 2 words to them, then I would say probably the one which you have already said is be authentic. I think in a world where everyone is trying to be someone else rather than being themselves or trying to, please others, I would recommend everyone to be your own self, Just try to please the man in the mirror. I don't think that you need to please anybody else. And the people who are themselves are actually more remembered, more kindly and for longer than all the copycats in the world. I think that's one advice that I would like to give anybody who would be actually getting into their first job next year.
I think that's brilliant advice, and I would completely agree with it. And it comes back to this whole idea of authenticity. Is people are fed up with lies. People are fed up with the way politicians talk, and I dare to be political for one moment, but if you think about what's happened in the presidential election, the fact you have a president that won't concede defeat, and is encouraging the sense that everything is a fraud, and to operate in that environment as a young person where you've got that going on, certainly in the UK, politicians haven't exactly covered themselves in glory for the last 10 years of coming across in an authentic and truthful way. And you've got that going on, and you've got some businesses that are equally, non-authentic and are caught out for lying or bad behavior. And therefore, who do you turn to? You turn to yourself. And you turn to yourself and the immediate environment you're in to say, okay, with all those macro things going on, I need to be even more clear that I'm working with people I believe in. I'm working in an environment that can be the best for me, but it is one that is true. It is authentic. It is real.
So, Mark, if you look at this year, I think it's all been with the pandemic, and I think all of us have learned something or the other. What are the long-lasting lessons that we should have learned from the pandemic going forward, according to you?
Well, I think interestingly, I'd like to think that what we're talking about, i.e. care, empathy, love in business, being authentic, loving what you do, leadership styles that embrace this, clarity and collaboration, feeling involved, feeling listened to, will just get accelerated. Because the one thing, obviously, that wherever you are in the world, that has happened is that there is much greater love and care for the community that you're in. It's interesting. I live in a 20 miles outside of central London, and we've lived where we had done in the same house for the last 25 years. And out of the pandemic came I live in a road called Daleside, and there's the Daleside support group on WhatsApp, and it really works. And therefore, suddenly you've got 25, I don't know how many people are on it, but 25, 30 people, who are helping one another. And I think that's a microcosm of what's happening. And therefore, if that's going on in your immediate environment, that needs to happen even more at work. I think obviously it's exposed once again what I call kind of heroes and villains. It's exposed once again, good and bad leadership. And interestingly, as I sort of joke, you can't wait for the McKinsey report now. You can't sit and for the management consultancy to turn up with in 3 months' time to tell you what to do. So it's actually, I think, interestingly, it's made the leaders who are running businesses in difficult times, that they're forced to fall back on what they know and how they behave, and therefore that actually exposes good and bad leadership. And I just wanted to, in a way, there was a case in point that I think made this. It was back in, I think, in May or June. So, what we didn't realize at the time was still relatively early stages of the pandemic in terms of the effect it's had on all of us. And 2 companies in the travel business, were having to make redundancies. One was Airbnb, and one was British Airways. And it's very interesting how they went about it. Brian Chesky, the CEO of Airbnb, who in many ways is one of these younger people we were referring to. I don't know how young he is, but he certainly won't be in his 50s or 60s. The way he approached having to make 25% of his company redundant was through his values. And he said, right, we need to get back to our roots, which meant we need to go back to the core product that we were good at, and we have to cut the bits that we were trying to expand into. And he went out of his way to talk to everybody at the same time, and also went out of his way to say that if you are made redundant, it is not because you are no good. You are very, very talented. You just happen to be in the wrong bit of the business. And therefore the way he went about it was empathetic and caring and loving, even though it was a very difficult time. British Airways just tried to fire 25,000 people, or 12,000, 25% of their workforce, 12,000 people or so, and most of the employees found out by the media. Now, there's an interesting little case, a little postscript to this, is that the CEO of the time, British Airways, has gone, and actually been replaced by a CEO who seems to be more of what we were talking before, of one who is more about collaboration, is more about coming together, is more about creating some love and some empathy. So, we'll have to wait and see. But I think the whole pandemic has just, accelerated everything in such a vast way. But I think at the core is love.
And I think what I feel, Mark, is that I think we have realized the true and full power and healing capacity of human connections like never before. I think in these tough times, I've seen so many people have come out of their way to help others and have become the messiahs the world has needed in such troubled times. And we just need to move out of our comfort zone for that. And for someone who always keeps empathy in the top drawer, there's, I think, no bigger joy than to help someone and have no expectations in return. And I think, secondly, I would like to say that idiom, less is more, kind of got its thumping validation in 2020. If anyone had a doubt about this one, they don't have it anymore. We have happily managed with much lesser for long enough that we can actually reprogram ourselves forever.
And no, to your first point, Dr. Prashant, this is why we're talking. We connected, a few months ago, partly through Hector Kapoor at Amazing Workplaces, and I got connected to her because she's interested in what I was talking about and writing, and what was lovely was we follow one another, and we've swapped LinkedIn messages, and I've learned that you are an advocate of Apple, and your Apple advertising as well as anybody else, and that's why it comes back to, it's a pleasure to talk to you in this way today, because what I've enjoyed about this is learning to, well, actually, it's not learning. It's well, it is learning, but it's the great thing is that you're sitting near Delhi. I'm sitting near London, and we've got a very common view of the world, and I think that's been one of the joys, if you like, is that people are standing up and saying, this is what I believe in, and finding that there are, a number of people out there throughout the world who are saying, what, I believe in the same thing. And therefore, there is that sense of connection and connectivity. It's funny. I mean, it goes back to your kind words at the introduction when I, over the word love. It was incredibly polarizing. There's a couple of anecdotes I share in the book where I talk about love and in the early days, and I had companies say to me, well, that's all very interesting, but when you go and talk to the next level up, can you use another word? Now, can you use something quite not so powerful? And of course, and actually, funny enough, it was because of that, it came out the other way, and I started to say, well, no, I've got to actually explain what I mean by love, so it doesn't seem as soft and fluffy. But I do think it comes back to, what we're talking about. And I'm going to spare your blushes a little bit. I'm incredibly proud of what you're doing, at within the eye hospital or the eye practice. And I'm, the fact that you and your team are actually excited by the whole idea of the customer experience, that actually you're thinking about the customer experience, rather than just, sadly, certainly in the UK with the National Health Service, which you don't really, they think about, obviously looking after you, but they don't really think about the experience you're going through. And I think it's brilliant, and I think it's all credit to your thinking. And I would never have known that 4 months ago or 5 months ago, that was going on. So I think there are many benefits out of what's happened.
And I'm amazed at, the sameness and the wavelength that we share, on topics. And I would kind of think on the same line as you. It's like, that kindred spirit that is there. And as you said, that I'm sitting in Delhi and you're sitting in London. So it's amazing. And I think there are many more people like us who are there. And I think who are working with that same mission of trying to, as you said, bring empathy and care, and also obviously focusing on the business point of view. You're not looking at not working out the numbers, but working numbers with the empathy is, I think, what everybody's mission should be, which is not in some cases. One part I would like to kind of, now this is the part which is something very, very dear to my heart, is change management. I would like to ask your thoughts about it. Why does it fail so often?
Well, I think it fails. It fails because it starts in the wrong place. So let me just expand upon that. It fails because often, if we take what we've been saying, which is actually there's a desire for belief, love, empathy, collaboration, feeling involved. So all those behaviors. And yet so many companies, when they're thinking about cultural change, they don't do that. They start off with they sometimes hire a company in to help them with this, or the leadership team that creates a strategy or a way of thinking or a new purpose or a new desire or a new something, and then they just tell people about it. So in my language, they lead with the head rather than the heart, and therefore, and the way traditionally a lot of those companies have gone around trying to involve people in the the cultural change or the management change program, or whatever change program it is they'll do it in a very head-led way. So and it's an odd phrase thinking about it, but it's what I call sheep dipping. Is that people, so they'll have a lot of company meetings where the boss will stand up and present the the new future or the new way or the new whatever, and everybody's supposed to, and then go through something and come out the other side branded with the new feel, and I think what happens is that people just go along for a day, and they might end up with a beer or a pizza at the end of the day, and then they're just not feeling involved. They're just being lectured to. The PowerPoints are out, and it's about rah rah, and this is the future, and therefore it starts in the wrong place. Whereas, perhaps not surprisingly, my perspective of this is the opposite. You have to start with heart. You have to start with heart, then head, and to get heart, people need to feel as though they are creating something. If you feel you're creating something, you believe in it. And if you feel you're involved in bringing the culture or the strategy or the change alive, and you've got a role, then you believe in it. And if you believe in something, then you're much more likely to live it. And I suppose the other side of it. So for me, these fail because they start the wrong way around. And then the other thing to add is they often use the wrong measures, and therefore, for me, the measures that work, because I think measures are important, are often just financial measures in any change management program. But for me, perhaps not surprisingly, the measures that I think work in terms of cultural change are behavioural measures. So you review and reward people in line with the culture. So it's not just about did you do the job or did you hit your target. It's about the way you did it as well. Is it in line with what we believe in? Is it in line with the phrase I use and you introduced at the beginning, the company spirit, the way we do business, what we believe in, and you reward accordingly, and that you review accordingly. And I use this, the last measure I recommend to my clients, I use this funny word called teeth. And what I mean by teeth is actually have the confidence to say to people, if they don't fit the culture, that they should go. And interestingly, it doesn't mean to say those people are bad people. It's just that they don't fit. And they may be much better off somewhere else where they do fit. But I think it's a challenge. If you've got people in the organization who don't believe in what you're doing, then it undermines everything in the first place.
And Mark, I feel that, and I've been in many organizations and I've seen that they wanted to attempt change or were in the middle of change, but eventually many of them failed because the top management wasn't fully convinced of this entire change thing. Buy-in of the top management is, I think, the very first prerequisite for a successful change management program. Everyone jumps onto the bandwagon, without the fortitude if there is no top management buy-in, and it becomes a painful journey. So if you have that buy-in and have the perseverance and the resilience that it's not going to be easy, and it will take time, because everybody wants nowadays in this instant generation, everybody wants change over a weekend, but it doesn't happen. It will take months.
No.
And if you have that resilience, you will be able to come out of it as a winner.
Well, there's a couple of things to add to what you've just said. One of my little throwaway lines is that cultural change is a marathon, not a sprint, and that's a truism. I think the other aspect about leadership is that they have to believe in it, but also live it. and again, that's one of the failures of the head-led approach is the CEO or the boss maybe making the presentation, but then 2 days later, is not living it, and therefore why would why would employees think that's the right thing to do? And I, it's one of my other little phrases, which is leaders are on stage all of the time, and it actually doesn't mean to say that they are physically on stage. I mean, as it on the stage, on the podium, making the presentation. I mean, sometimes they are, but they're on stage all of the time in what they do. When they walk into the office, how they have the cup of coffee, how they manage meetings, how they talk to you. Do they walk around and are interested in what you're doing? And people watch and observe, and therefore they're completely wired to the behavior of the boss. And if the boss is actually there, living and breathing the cultural change, living and breathing what they've said, so that it's not just about words, it's about actions and behaviors. It reinforces to people, okay, well, that's great. They are, they're doing what they're saying, and yet so many companies don't. I mean, my little anecdote, I suppose, is in my work, I've been to a lot of receptions. I've sat in a lot of receptions waiting to go into a meeting. And that is not 100% true, but one of the things I always find as a little aside is that if the values or the mission statement or whatever statement is written up in reception, it's not lived. Because if they have to make a big thing about it, underneath where the receptionist is or up on the wall, then you can almost guarantee it's not lived. Whereas actually, the spirit of the company doesn't need it to be enshrined in lots of posters. It's enshrined in how people are and how they behave.
Thanks a ton, Mark. It was wonderful. I think in a great beginning, I would say you were the best choice, I would say, for the first guest on this show that I have started. And it was a very stimulating discourse. And I would like to encourage the viewers to like this video and subscribe this channel for more such videos, and press the bell icon, as they say, to be notified for the new content. Thanks once again, Mark, and look forward to our continued discussions anyway. And I think today the viewers have got to know more about you, and I think I would ask each one of them to read your new book, The Business Case for Love, and I think they'll find much more in that book from where we discussed today. Thanks for being there.
No, well, thank you, and it's been a joy and it's been a pleasure, and I've loved it. So it's been great to see you again.
Same here. Thank you.
Okay, I'll give you a wave. Stay safe.
You too.